Welcome to the Mike Litton Experience Podcast. Mike has over 31 years experience in real estate, finance, and investing. He's passionate about being a father, a teacher, a realtor, an investor, and a leader. Everyone has a story, and our passion is to help them tell it. And now, introducing the host of the Mike Litton Experience, Mike Litton.
So what can you expect from the Mike Litton Experience? You can expect stories that will inspire, motivate, advice that will sharpen your focus, and expert information on real estate, finance, and market conditions. Jackson White, thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience. I'm super excited for our time together. Like we talked about before we hit record, everybody has a story. And our passion is to help them tell it. So with your permission, we're going to start with where you were born, go all the way up to today. And then we want to talk about this app that you invented called Treasure Tracker. I think it's so cool. My Treasure Tracker, pardon me. I think it's so cool. So thanks again for being here, bud.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. This is such a cool experience. So I guess you just wanted me to talk pretty much just like straight from birth, or do it
So let's
go?
talk about where you were born and go all the way up. We're going to go all the way up to today.
Okay, so I was born in Denver, Colorado,
Okay.
1999, and actually was born with some health complications, if you could believe it. Born umbilical cord wrapped around my neck, and as a kid, very young, all the way up until I was about 4, I even basic coordination was hard. Whether it was walking around or moving, all these different things, even speech, uh, came pretty hard to me. And what was interesting is when I turned 4, my parents got me a birthday gift, and it was a 1-year pass to join my sister's karate dojo. And I remember, I don't remember it, but they will always say when I
You were
was 2,
four?
yeah, when I was 4 years old.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I was 2 or 3, I was too young, but I'd try to run out onto the mats
Yeah.
and hit the pads. So I was
But
always
she
super.
was out there, right?
She was out there, she was
Yeah.
practicing, I'm like, "That's so cool, I wanna do
Yeah.
it too." I don't remember that, I was way too
Me
young.
too, me too, me too. Yeah,
Like,
right.
"Let me
Yeah.
go." And so I'd run out, and then finally when I turned 4, that was the cutoff age, they actually started accepting students. I decided to join, and what was a miracle about it is within that 1 year, all of those coordination things, it was almost like a miracle, got miraculously fixed. I learned how to walk better. I mean, it taught me these movements and it taught me that belief in myself, um, that I harbored to this day. And what happened is I stuck with it all the way up until I went to high school. Did all my schooling in Denver, and got to high school, took a bit of a break. And once I finished out high school, I actually went off to China for 2 years. So there's a university out there, NYU has a program, and did that for about 2 years. Was supposed to go for the 4, and unfortunately, COVID hit. I know everybody's got a COVID story, everybody's got a pandemic story.
Yeah.
Something that kind of went awry because of it. Uh, but kind of a small blessing is it let me come home. I transferred to CU Boulder. I got to see my family more and finished out with economics there. And then shortly thereafter, during my time and based on my experiences there, I was inspired to start the app Treasure Tracker. Um, that is all about nowadays, it's about how do we connect to our family through the things that we own, all these different treasures. It could be paintings, could be artwork, could be sculptures, could be a rubber duck, could be anything that connects you to your loved ones.
It's cool, man. I was just on there earlier, and there's like an Apple MacBook or something in there. I mean, it's or iPad or I mean, it's
Great.
right. It's like, but it's plug and play. That's the cool thing is,
Mhm.
when from the moment that you open it up, you're literally putting your wishes in writing. You're doing the things that the family wants done. It basically takes this thing that could be a chaotic mess, or oftentimes is a chaotic mess, and
Mhm.
it brings it in and gleans it, turns it into something that can be manageable, which is cool.
Mhm.
And I think, like I told you before, I think it's invaluable for families who are who have a loved one that's older, right,
Mhm.
or somebody who just passed, kind of thing, right? and they've inherited all this, and they've got to come in and they've got to try and organize it somehow. My grandfather, my paternal grandfather, my dad's father, passed away suddenly from a heart attack, and he had just unbelievable amounts of things that he had collected over the years. And he deposited those things on the 5-acre place that he and my grandmother owned. And it took my dad and I a couple of weeks solid, full-time, nonstop, like 12, 14-hour days to get this place cleaned up so she could sell it, because she had no use for it. Once he was gone, there wasn't any, she wasn't going to be able to keep it up, and she didn't have cattle or any of that kind of, she didn't need 5 acres, right? And she had a place in Ponca City, in the city. They were just outside of Ponca City where I grew up, where I was born. And she had this condo that she had her eyes on, and so she needed to sell the farm to make this work, and it all ended up working out. She ended up buying this, or taking out this condo, moving into this condo right across the hall from my 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Garrett.
Wow.
From elementary school.
You're talking about a small world earlier.
My grandmother was a school teacher for decades, right?
Right.
And just right across the hall from Mrs. Garrett. So I run into Mrs. Garrett in the elevator 30 some years after being in 2nd grade. Okay. And she looks at me and she goes, "You haven't changed a bit." Right. But I think I feel like this app is something that is incredibly valuable for people, and it's a real tool. And I think it's you haven't even seen, I don't think, the value it's going to bring to people yet. But I'm excited to be a part of this journey with you and see, what you discover as you go. So let's go back for just a second, if that's okay. So you get into karate. So my son, by the way, my son Michael was born with an umbilical cord around his neck. He was born with a C-section, and the OBGYN actually stopped the C-section, stopped the operation, so that I could see. She held him up and showed me the cord wrapped around his neck, and I'm like, "Take that off of him! What are you doing?" You know what I mean? It's like
get it as fast as you
right?
can.
Come on now, So and he was, he's obviously hasn't breathed yet or any of that kind of stuff, so he's all purple, right? He's like, "Come on now,"
Yeah, no,
Anyway.
same case.
Oh, it's just crazy. So, and Michael and Madison, we actually had them in a program called Brain Highways that helped them to develop. They went through exercises and different things that helped them to develop their neuro connections in their brain, spinal cord, all that kind of thing from being newborns. And it sounds like you did something similar to that in karate. So let's go back for just a second, if it's okay, to your childhood. Obviously, all this happened in Denver, right?
Yes.
Okay. So growing up, what was your favorite thing about growing up in Denver?
Favorite thing. At the time, it's funny, I don't know if I fully appreciated it, but as I started talking to more classmates and friends and peers and colleagues, it was the fact that I had my family so close. So for example, on my mom's side, all my aunts, all my uncles lived in Colorado, maybe 20 minutes down the road, and my grandfather as well. And then later on, I think when I was maybe 5 or 6 years old, on my dad's side, my grandparents moved in from Ohio, and so I had my family really close. And so all these holidays, Thanksgiving and Christmas, I was able to spend that time with them, and that was something really special. And I think that's something that I took for granted as a kid, but as I look back on it, I really have a fond appreciation of those moments.
Cool. So growing up, who was the most influential person to you?
Gosh, man, that's a hard one. There's so many. I mean, obviously, the one that pops to mind super fast is my parents. I was blessed to have some of the most incredible parents, supportive, kind, thoughtful. Both of them are leaders. They taught me how to think and empathize with people. And they taught me all these life lessons, just in different ways too, because they have different ways of thinking, of course. And of course, my grandparents are phenomenal. And I mean, going back to the karate example, I had some incredible instructors. I was blessed to, even to this day, guy named Tony, Roger, Kevin, all of them were kind of my childhood instructors when I was training martial arts. And they taught me really important life lessons too that just carry forward to this day.
But what's the most important thing you learned in the entire time you were in karate?
The most important thing, I mean, it's the stereotypical answer, but it's very true, is it's the mindset. I've been training with this guy, his name's Tom Callahan, he's a Kyokushin guy,
Mhm.
and incredible martial artist, incredible guy, and he's been teaching more about, like, I guess, the, what the philosophy actually is, and it's Budo. And it's all about the mindset of discipline and never giving up and pushing through obstacles. Um, and that really resonates with me because when I was a kid, uh, I had difficulty even just walking. And it's through that perseverance and through these lessons that people taught me and they pushed me to do that I grew into the person I am today. And now I'm off in November. I'm actually going to be competing in an international full contact karate tournament.
In
So
Costa
like this
Rica,
little
right?
kid that could never walk
In Costa Rica, right?
now, yeah, competing
Yeah.
at a super high level.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Yeah.
So I know this is going to sound a little redundant,
Mhm.
but what was the level that you reached in karate?
So it's kind of funny. So I went through an interesting journey. I got to black belt as a kid.
Okay.
Um, so I got
How
my
old were
black
you?
belt way too young, in my opinion.
How
I
old
was
were you?
I was 10 or 11
Okay.
uh, when I got it. Now the hard part is you can't progress until you're 16.
Okay.
So I got stuck there, and then that's part of the reason I took a break, because I was like, man, I'm stuck. I can't
Yeah.
really go anywhere.
Right.
And so I took a break, and then I came back to it after I finished college. There was a dojo in my area, uh, and what was funny, it used to be part of the same franchise
Mhm.
that I was training with years and years and years ago. It's Kempo.
Mhm.
Um, and so now it was reconnecting back to that root. And I still train there. I actually teach there still.
Okay.
Uh, and I actually restarted at white belt. So I was like, let me go in with a fresh slate. I'm an adult now. Let's just restart from the beginning and go from there. And so the plan is now, I think right now I'm a green belt and kind of just seeing where it goes from there. And then love teaching, love training,
You
and
don't
then
need
at
to
the
be a
other
black
dojo
belt to
too.
teach.
Huh?
You don't need to be a black belt to teach.
You don't need a black belt to teach. And they do treat me as a little bit of a special exception because I knew all the material already. So
Yeah.
they're kind of like, okay, you can teach pretty much any rank.
So in the competition thing, you don't have to be a certain level to compete.
So the competition, it's a little bit separate. So I'm actually training two styles. So
Oh
the one
gosh.
I grew up with and the one I'm teaching is Kempo. But the one I'm really training seriously now is called Kyokushin.
Right.
And what drew me to it is going back to the challenge and perseverance. It's one of those arts where, as I mentioned, it's full contact karate, and it's one of the few that are. So there's no, I mean, you get a groin protector and a mouth guard. Uh, and some of you can't like kick the knee, you can't kick the groin, and you can't punch the head, but you can kick it, which
Right.
is wild to me
Right.
because it's like which one's stronger?
Yeah.
And so I'm in the middle ranks there. So I'm not a black belt in that art either, but I'll be competing in it, and it's my first competition in it. So I'm excited to see. It's an all American, so North and South America. Uh, but I'm excited. It's gearing up on the terms of the training.
And when is it?
This is going to be in November.
Okay. Cool.
Mhm.
So it's coming up.
It's coming up. I know.
Right.
I have it marked on my calendar. I keep looking at it. I'm like, did I do enough training today, Shane?
Am I eating right? You
Am I
know?
eating right? Am
Okay.
I getting protein?
So I know I keep doing this, but let's go back for just a second. So you
Uh-huh.
grow up in Denver, and you're in karate. You're 12
Mhm.
years old. You're a black belt, that kind of thing, right? You go to high school.
Mhm.
In high school, did you play any sports other than karate?
Gosh, so I got a funny story there. So we have to play sport. So at the high school I was, for two of the semesters, you had to do a sport.
Okay.
Um, and so one of the semesters, I chose tennis. I had never picked up a tennis racket in my life.
Interesting.
And I go to show up. And now my school is like state renowned for tennis. They have one of the best programs. And so I don't know what I was thinking when I was 14, but
Right.
I was like, I'm going to sign up. I'm going to go. Just going to see how I fare. I'm definitely not going to be last.
Right.
And sure enough, well, it cracks me. I was dead last on the roster.
You're
And
swimming upstream.
and what irks me to this day is my friend. He had a knee surgery earlier in the summer, but he still signed up for the team. His last name started with a B. My last name starts with a W.
Right.
He was in a wheelchair the whole season. I was active. He still ranked higher than me.
Wow. Wow.
So I learned. I never did tennis again. I was like, I learned my lesson. Stick with
Good.
what I know.
That took care of that deal.
Oh
Did,
yeah.
did you have a favorite sport?
I think I did some mountain biking, which was pretty fun. I
Yeah.
did end up actually breaking my arm 2 times during it.
Wow.
Uh, but it was a fun sport and I enjoyed it. And I went off a couple too many ramps, as you can tell.
Gotcha. In high school, did you have a favorite subject?
Gosh, well, to this day, I love history. Um, I think it connects you in a lot of different ways. Of course, obviously, it connects you to the past, and everybody says history repeats itself, and there are patterns you can learn from. One of my favorite books I'm reading now is The Principles of a Changing World Order by Ray
Dalio.
Dalio.
Dalio,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's a fantastic
Yeah,
read.
he's amazing. That's an
Oh,
amazing book, by the way.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I think he approaches it from the lens of a stockbroker too.
Yeah.
So it's all these economic trends, which was my major as well. And what I also love about history too, and we talked about this at the beginning of the podcast, is you learn people's stories.
Yeah.
So of course you can focus on the aggregate history side where you can read a textbook and say, oh, 2 million people did this and XYZ, but it's really interesting when you actually pick up a primary source from that time and you read, what was it really like for this person? What did they do? And and those are the kind of things that just inspire me.
And it should. It
Mhm.
should. That's awesome. So you decide at some point to go to college
Mhm.
and you decide to go to China for 2 years. Talk
Yes.
about talk about the talk about what went into that decision making. Like I know it was with NYU, right?
Mhm.
What made you number one apply to NYU? Number two, what made you decide to study in China for 2 years and why?
Absolutely. It was a weird experience. It was an amazing experience, and I don't think that many people would choose to do it. Um, But what happened was I was actually interested in going to school in New York.
Mm,
I visited the city when I was younger, and I fell in love with the fast pace. I don't know if I could do it now,
mm,
but younger me had a lot more energy
yeah.
and a lot more of that drive to be in this big city. Not to say Denver's small or anything, but New York is a whole nother level.
There's an
And
energy
so I
to it.
started looking at
There's a
schools out
buzz.
there.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's crazy. And so I looked at NYU, I looked at Columbia, looked at just some different programs out in the Manhattan area. And we did like a campus tour, and they promoted there was a 4-year China program. So they just opened it, I think in 2012. And at the time it was 2018 when I was looking at schools. It was a brand new program. And you actually got 2 degrees. You got one from NYU and you got one from East China Normal University. It
Wow.
was pretty cool.
Wow,
And so I
cool.
turned to my mom and I go, "That sounds really cool. I want to apply." And she's like, "Absolutely not. Stone cold, no, you're not applying."
Ah,
And so I
that would
put
be a
together a
no.
college application. Oh, yeah, she was against the idea at the beginning. And so I was like, "Okay, I'll listen to my mom. I'm not gonna apply to that program."
Good.
So I put together, an application for NYU, and this is my little dirty secret as a high school senior.
Right.
I put together 1 college application.
Wow.
Just I was kinda like, I'll do 1 early application. If I get into NYU, I'm gonna go,
Right.
especially if I get a scholarship with them. And if I don't, or if it's too expensive, then I'll reconsider. I'll apply in that 2-week period
Right.
and just put together some stuff over winter break.
Right.
So I applied to NYU, and I applied for the New York campus, but, as a second option, I do put China,
Right.
and Abu Dhabi was the 3rd one at the time. And a couple months later, they get back to me in November, and they say, I get an email that says, "Congratulations on your acceptance to NYU, Shanghai."
Oh, yeah.
And so I was like, "Huh, I didn't apply to that program," but I called my mom, I was
Yeah, you're
running
like,
between classes.
mom.
Yeah, exactly, that's what it was. I was like, "Mom, so I got something to say.
Yeah,
I'm
mom.
going
First
to
of
China
all,
next
I
year."
love you.
And she's like, "What? Are you kidding?" I was like,
What?
"Out of
Yeah,
class now. Bye, love
yeah.
you."
You're so true.
So, I get home later that day, and we sit down, we have a discussion, and we look more into the details of the program, and I got a it was a pretty good scholarship as well since it was a new program,
Yeah,
and it was one of those where it's like, this it seems like a great opportunity, and to this day, I don't know why they put me in that program. They never said, they just decided that I would be a good fit for the Shanghai campus.
that's cool, dude. What a great story. So you go to China
Mhm.
and you're there for how long?
About a year and a half. So I
Okay.
do full freshman year there, and I do my sophomore first semester,
Okay.
and then COVID, of course, hit during that winter.
So
And
when COVID hit and you were there, what
Mhm.
happened? Did they basically say, okay, you need to go back to the
Yeah.
States?
So what happened, I was there early. So my roommate at the time, he was from China.
Mhm.
He grew up in this province, Sichuan province, kind of out west,
Yeah.
and he invited me to his house for Chinese New Year.
There you
And so I flew out, and at the time, America wasn't recording anything about this. And so I just fly into China. I have no idea this is going on.
go.
No mask at the time, and I just walk out of the plane, I'm like, "Wow, why people" I was like, "I know people wear masks because of pollution." Like, I would wear some if it was really bad. I was like, "It's a clear day," and then Robert comes up to me, my roommate. He's like, "What are you doing?" He's like,
Dude,
you need to put on
you
a
need a
mask."
mask, yeah.
Yeah, and so he fills me in what's going on, and so we go to his hometown, and throughout the course of that next week or so, things really started to escalate in China with the lockdown procedures. I was in the train station when they quarantined the city of Wuhan.
Wow.
Um, yeah, it was a big kind of alarm, and they were talking like, "This train to Wuhan's now canceled. This train is now canceled. This train's now canceled," and they go through, and it was definitely scary at the time because you didn't know the extent of what was going on. There was kind of unknown statistics on who it impacted the most and what the symptoms truly were and the severity. And of course, it was very severe. And I remember kinda quarantining with his family at in their house, and at some point, his dad actually works with the Communist Party out in China, and he's like, "I have kind of inside knowledge." He's like, "If you wanna go back to the US, you need to get a flight now, because if you don't, you're gonna be stuck, you're gonna have to get a military evac out,
Right.
if you wanna get back to the US." And so we managed to book a flight, fly back to the US, and then from there, just did classes online, uh, up until I actually transferred to CU.
Wow, that's wild. So
Yeah,
you
it was
transfer to
crazy.
CU and you
Mhm.
end up earning a degree in economics. Was your original program with NYU economics?
So the original program I was doing was actually finance,
Okay.
doing business and finance. For some reason, some of the credits didn't quite transfer over to the business school at CU. So ended up just saying like, let's just apply directly just for the general college and study economics from there because it's not identical, it's not one for one, but it's a similar field, and I like economics quite a bit.
You were at CU for 2 years.
Was at CU for 2 years.
Did you know a girl by the name of Kennedy?
By the name of what?
Kennedy?
Kennedy. I'm not too sure. No, I don't think
So
so.
my wife's best friend in college,
Uh-huh.
her oldest is Kennedy, and
Uh-huh.
Kennedy attended CU at the same time you did.
Okay. Was she doing
I know it's a big
economics or was she
school,
doing?
but right?
I was gonna say
I
it's a
know it's just
20,000.
right. Um, just it's a small world. You never know, right?
Yeah, right.
So, okay, so you graduate from CU with a
Mhm,
degree in economics.
mhm,
Obviously, amazing background from your time, with Shanghai and all that.
mhm.
Um, so once you graduate from college, where do you go from there?
Yeah, that was actually it was the first month and a half, 2 months out of college, it was difficult finding direction. And actually, at the time, I was ideating Treasure Tracker, because during my final year there, uh, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Marshall Fire that happened in the Boulder area, but this happened at December, right before New Year's Eve, December 2021. And what happened is I think it was an electrical fire, and it was a very windy day, 70-mile-per-hour winds, and 1,000 homes burned down in under, I think, I wanna say 2 or 3 hours.
It was insane.
And yeah, even 2 people lost their lives, and it was a tragedy in the community. I remember I was working at a liquor store at the time, just as a cashier for a college job, and people would come up and say, I remember the most poignant moment for me is this guy came in, was buying a bottle of champagne, and he was distraught. He's like, "I have to celebrate New Year's Eve in my hotel room because I no longer have a house." Yeah, like, just it was horrible to watch, and from then on, I remember watching the news and watching claim coverages, and it took months and months and months, actually even years, for people to actually receive settlements on the property damage, and for no fault of anybody. The insurance company was doing what the best of what they could do, and the people impacted, were doing what the best they could do because they didn't have a home inventory is the problem, so they had to recall from memory everything they had. Even the minute items like dog food was a problem. It was crazy, and I remember sitting there and ideating in my last semester of college this idea for Treasure Tracker, and I was bounced back and forth with my dad, and the initial prototype was purely a home inventory app. Going back to it, I remember you were talking about the storytelling, that didn't even exist yet. It started off purely home inventory. You have your items logged for insurance purposes, and it's done. That way, if something ever happens like this, you're immediately covered.
Right. And that's brilliant. We had wildfires out here
Mhm.
many years ago, decades ago. And one of them in particular, or two of them in particular, destroyed hundreds of homes. I mean, it was unbelievable. And what we found afterwards, when you're looking at everything, I had a radio show. My first radio show in San Diego was in 2011,
Mhm.
and there were 500 plus homeowners that were suing the local utility here,
Oh, wow.
and we had their attorney on. And one of the things we found was that 83% of the people whose homes burned to the ground or were damaged were underinsured. And so on the program, on the show that we did, we had a buddy of mine who was one of my best friends
Mhm.
came on, and he's a expert witness, or at the time was an expert witness, still is, with the insurance industry in terms of natural disasters. So when Malibu burned to the ground, when a bunch of the houses in Malibu burned to the ground before that, his company was in charge of rebuilding Malibu.
Right.
And they worked with insurance companies and all that. So we had him come on. He and this attorney and I had this conversation on the air about what people should do, and one of them was to take a video camera. At the time, it was a video camera with a tape in it, right? I'm dating myself, but go through and walk through verbally and with a video
Right. Take
camera of
every
what your house looks like and what different possessions you have, and then take that tape and put it in a safety deposit box somewhere where it won't burn up if
Right.
your house burns to the ground, right? And there were a lot of people that out here, their house burned to the ground and they were underinsured and they couldn't afford to rebuild.
Right.
And one of the reasons they couldn't afford to rebuild was they changed the regs. So out here, they changed the regulations to where if you had a driveway, your
Mhm.
driveway had to be, in some instances, tripled in width. So that no joke, so that
Ooh.
two firefighting vehicles, the big ones, could
Mhm.
pass each other without touching, and they still have plenty of room. So one could come in, one could come out, right?
Right.
So, and then they had all kinds of different, and this is back in the out country, of course, the back
Mhm.
country, but they had all kinds of different requirements that cost so much money for people. And these people didn't have that money. They didn't have, you know what I mean? And so it's a real thing. And at the time was a real thing because wildfires weren't that prevalent.
Mhm.
Wildfires hadn't happened that much. And in San Diego, we hadn't had a wildfire in years. And so a lot of people were caught off guard and underinsured and, the whole unprepared, the whole thing. So,
Mhm.
and it was tough because it broke a lot of people's hearts. It broke our hearts just listening to the stories, you
Right,
know.
just hearing it, 'cause
It
it's dev
turned out the local utility here ended up having to settle because they they had culpability,
right.
and they had to work all that out in the courts and all that kind of thing. But it was interesting because we were able to give people some concrete steps they could take to, to try to be prepared should something like that happen again. So,
Mhm.
at least we helped, right?
Absolutely.
But I love the fact that you jumped in and started doing that, and that was basically the precursor to Treasure Tracker. So let's talk about Treasure Tracker for a second because like I told you, I did download the app,
Mhm.
um, and I think it's brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Thank you.
But talk about the features. Talk about who it works for,
Mhm.
who potentially will find value with it.
Mhm. Absolutely. I think so the prior version of Treasure Tracker, the one that was just purely home inventory, I worked with it for about a year. And there was a fundamental problem with it, is nobody really actually wants to go through their house like that.
Yeah,
Uh, even asking people to what you were saying, even asking people to go through and take a video,
yeah,
most people don't do it, even though it's a simple task. I haven't even done it in my new apartment yet.
right.
Even though it's such a simple task, it's a chore out of the day. And
Mhm.
so we stuck with that path for well over a year, made no sales, and it was just crashing and burning. And I was actually on the verge of giving up the idea. Um, and it wasn't until last year that something happened personally in my family. My grandfather, my dad's side, he passed, and he he was an incredible guy. He was an incredible man, and in a lot of different ways. He was a computer science professor, a racquetball player, choir member, world traveler, and most of all, an amazing grandfather. And he was a loving husband and a great father to his kids, and he was just connected with his family. And when he passed, one of the hardest things for us was a couple of different things. Is one, he left behind just a lot of stuff. I mean, he of course as a professor, he had a lot of books. He would actually do his own stock trades. So he'd get all these magazines and books. He actually had one called "How to Stash Your Money in Foreign Markets," which raises some eyebrows. But I was like, I don't know what he was doing offshore, but he had a lot of just small things, especially from his travels as well, that we don't necessarily have the story on. Um, and again, there's also some other things too, and one of the biggest impacts for us is we don't have many audio recordings or video recordings of him. He was a computer science professor, but he hardly ever used a phone. And he yeah, he's like, he hardly ever used his phone. And so we don't have, for example, like voice recordings of him or voicemail. And actually, the one video we do have of him is him singing at a Christmas dinner. And it's a cherished thing we have is that video. Because it's one of the few things we have of him where we can really hear him speak. Um, and what happened is Treasure Tracker kind of turned at that moment. I recognized there was a lot of things I wished I had asked him, and I wish I had the story behind. And Treasure Tracker then turned from less about organize your items. That's probably why you saw the MacBook Pro on the promo, is we haven't updated it. It's less about that. It's less about that aspect of like, oh, these are chairs, this is a couch, and more about what's the fundamental story behind your items.
Yeah.
And what we're really looking to target, kind of a long roundabout answer here, is we're looking to target homeowners 45 and up that have older children who are probably 18 and up. We believe that's the best demographic because these are people that have a lot of stuff. They have that connection with their family and they want to preserve that connection even when they're gone and preserve that legacy of their family. Because I can't tell you how many people I've talked to that are like, I've heard the horror stories of people that have lost a relative and they receive some kind of obscure painting and they put it on an estate sale and they sell it for $100 and lo and behold, it's a cherished family heirloom or it's a Van Gogh original, probably not. But it's could be something, whether it's financially or sentimental, it could be something priceless. And that's what we're looking to preserve is these stories behind those things.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. And it's interesting, when you're 45, 50 years old, right? And you've got kids that are growing and almost grown and that kind of deal. You start thinking about legacy, right? You start thinking about grandkids. You start thinking about the next generations, right? And what you're going to leave them, what you're going to teach them, that kind of thing,
Right.
and what you want them to know. You know, that's really cool, man. That's really, really cool. So Treasure Tracker is an app that people can download on both Apple and Android, correct?
That's
Right.
correct.
Now I have an iPhone, so I downloaded mine on iOS.
Mhm.
Um, and it's literally you set up an account and you're in. You can start
That's it.
using it right away.
Absolutely. So we have a couple different options for users. So we have a free trial version where if users aren't certain if they want to pay for it quite yet, they have a free account where they can input 25 items, one property. They can generate 3 reports. So it's the bare bones functionality of it, but of course they can tell their story.
Yeah.
And so this is for people that have maybe 5 or 6 things in their house that they really, really want to pass down and they really want to share the story. But might not have more than 25 items they feel that are necessary for that. And then, of course, we do have a subscription plan. So we got a monthly and a yearly one. Right now, it's about 4.90 a month or $45 a year, and that's where we're keeping the price point at right now. Um, actually, one of the other things too we're working with is we're partnering with real estate agents, insurance agents, and estate attorneys as a way to offer a referral program. So they can approach Treasure Tracker or vice versa. And what we'll do from there is set up an account with them where they can push this app out, push Treasure Tracker to all their clients or the clients they think would benefit from this. And the best part is their clients are going to get it 3 months premium free, so they can do unlimited properties, unlimited items, estate planning, all these different functionalities, and of course, recording the story. And they, as a result, the estate attorney or whoever, whichever group it is, they get their logo branded within the app. So it's something that it establishes a closer tie to their audience. Um, and that's what we're ultimately fundamentally trying to achieve is we're trying to connect generations by bringing these treasures to life. That's our focus.
So we have an estate attorney that we interviewed for the podcast, and I went back. We just surpassed. I told you
Mhm.
before we hit record that we just surpassed 1 million listens, and we just had our first anniversary, right? And so we're just over a year old. And one of the things that I did was I went back and looked at the top 50. So I
Mhm.
took the top 50, kind of like a 50 countdown kind of thing to one, right? So we're going to do this 50 episode countdown. So number
Yep.
50 all the way down to all the way to one. And one of the most popular, one of the most listened to episodes is the interview that we did with this estate attorney out of Coachella Valley. So we'll have to get you together with him
That would be
and
fantastic.
other estate attorneys that you can network with. And this is an app that I believe brings an incredible amount of value to anybody that downloads it. So if somebody's going to the App Store, and again, I think App Store because of iOS, but if they're going to the App Store, how are they going to find your app? What do they look up? It's
Absolutely.
Treasure Tracker.
So look up Treasure Tracker app.
Okay.
Uh, Treasure Tracker pops up. It's kind of funny, even though it is called Treasure Tracker on the App Store.
Yeah.
Sometimes when people look up Treasure Tracker, because it's still a very new app, it's still a very
Yeah.
new company, it'll pop up metal detector apps,
Oh, wow.
like literal treasure trackers.
That's wild. That's wild. That's
So if you
cool.
look up Treasure Tracker app, whether it's on Android or iOS, it should pop up. It's the blue logo with the diamond looking one.
Yeah, it's really cool. It's really cool. And you've done a great job.
Thank
Uh,
you.
is there anything you'd like to cover before we wrap up?
No, this was an incredible experience, and I'd say the biggest thing I would just want to say is thank you for having me on, and
Thank
I'm
you.
I'm humbled and I'm grateful for just the opportunity.
We're humbled and grateful you made time for us. This has been a lot of fun. And I knew we would enjoy our time just from our previous conversation, I knew we'd enjoy our time together, and this has been way more fun than I thought it would be. So thank you so much for being here. And thank you so much for being our guest on the Mike Litton Experience.
Thank you, Mike.
Appreciate you, buddy. We hope you enjoyed another episode of the Mike Litton Experience. If you did, do us a favor, smash that subscribe button, tell your friends, family, and coworkers about our program, and wherever you get your podcasts, please leave us a rating. It helps us to connect with quality people just like you.
And that's a wrap. Another episode of the Mike Litton Experience in the books. Reach out to Mike on Instagram at Litton Realty. Want to meet with Mike? Check out calendly.com/Rio760.